Indie News Network, collaborative family of independent content creators. Co-hosted normally by me, Indy. I'm founder and editor of Indie Left News and Indie Media Today. I got Reef Breland sitting next to me.
At Kennedy News.
Is Andrew Rivera on The Handsome Cynic?
Politics and Survival.
My name is Jesse Jett.
It's American Tradition.
What's up, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden.
I mostly make art for INN.
BigMadCrab, Joe. Keep up those great videos.
Hey guys, it's Yeti coming at you.
Hello, my name is Lucy from Blue Moon Red Wine.
This is Chris Legion.
Keep fighting that good fight out there, guys. I'll talk to you later.
Who are these people?
Hey friends, bunch of weirdos, that's who we are. All right, so welcome to, I think it's the third installment of Indie News Network and Antiwar.com collaborating on the Israel-Palestine issue. We just wanted to bring the two crews together to have, painful discussions about the atrocities that are playing out on the world stage right now. So really quickly, before we dive into Israel-Palestine stuff, I do have a selfish ask. As many of you may have already seen, Julian Assange is facing two new court dates in February 20th and 21st. It's a big deal. This is kind of the last stand, sort of. It's a little convoluted and a little weird. There are some potential other legal avenues that they can pursue. The European Court of Human Rights, that in and of itself has some tricky political stuff going on. So we're not really sure how effective that would even be if they attempted to go that route. But this is essentially his last chance at attempting to avoid extradition to the United States. Stella has been calling it Day X. She was doing that in an effort to encourage people to sign up. You can sign up at, I think it's don'textraditeassange.org to get text messages or email notices whenever something happens, because as is the case in the Assange situation, very rarely do we ever have like a scheduled date and time for anything. It's usually just like, hey, it took 8 months for the last decision to be announced. And it was just like on a random Tuesday, hey, we decided to deny the request for appeal. So that's usually how that stuff goes. So you can still sign up for that stuff. But in the meantime, as we move into these two dates in February, again, February 20th and 21st, first of all, if you're in London or anywhere near London, or you can make it to London, for February 20th and 21st, we need literally all the people. If you can get there, we need bodies outside the court. So it's the Royal Court of Justice. Go. There's going to be events taking place. I think they're going to start gathering around 8 or 8:30. I do believe court is scheduled to begin at 9. So if you can be there, be there. But if you are in the United States and cannot make it to London, in the meantime, you can call your elected Congress critters and request that they sign on to the bipartisan legislation in the House. It's called House Resolution 934. So the phone number is there on your screen, 202-224-3121. You can go ahead and ask your House member. It is a piece of House legislation, so you can ask your House member to sign on to that, but also contact your senators and start moving the needle there as well. Because once it moves through the House, obviously we'll have to get some support in the Senate. And so if we start to build that now, the sooner the better. So make those phone calls, leave messages. I know a lot of them are probably not in office yet, but leave messages, send emails, tweet about it, share this tweet or any tweet that has the information on it. We just need to make as much noise as humanly possible. And once again, because people are always like, oh my God, Misty, phone calls are not going to save him. No shit, Sherlock. But as I have always said, the only thing that saves Julian Assange is mass public pressure. And that's what phone calls do. I don't make any, I'm under no delusion that phone calls are going to be the end all be all for saving Julian Assange, but it's something very quick, very easy that everyone can do. So just do it. It'll make me happy. All right. Sorry, selfish little aside there. Okay, so we have Dave Decamp here and Rob Durden, and we are going to be talking about Israel-Palestine again. So first of all, fellas, how you doing? Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too.
Good to meet you, Robert. We never spoke before.
Oh,
yeah, it's a pleasure, man.
Yeah, Dave's fantastic. Everybody knows I love Dave and Rob. I use Dave's articles all the time on my show. So if you watch my show, you know I use Dave's articles all the time. Okay, so speaking of Dave's articles, let's bring up one. This I thought was pretty interesting. Once again, you guys know I have 900 tabs open, so please be patient with me as I shuffle through them. It's hard for me in my ADHD to remain focused here. Okay, so this I thought was super interesting. Dave has an article out from January 4th. The Biden campaign is suffering quite a bit of pressure from inside their own staff. I think the administration, we've seen multiple people resign from numerous positions. We have a bunch of, I think that there was a bunch of interns who did a protest sort of a situation on the steps of the Capitol, I think it was. So Dave, tell us about this, because I think that this is, to me, I think this is pretty significant to see people from inside the administration actively protesting and calling the Biden administration's support for the genocide in Gaza out. I think that it's awesome. It's great to see.
Yeah, and it's definitely significant dissent. It's not really like small pockets. It seems like it's pretty widespread. There's been like hundreds of officials in the State Department, USAID, even the Department of Homeland Security, like signing on to these letters. And some people have resigned. And so these are Biden campaign staffers. It's only 17 signed off onto this, but in their letter, they said they're having volunteers quit in droves. And I imagine it's a lot of young people, a lot of young Democrats. Because that's the demographic that is, most unhappy about what Biden's doing here. So, to kind of tie in what you were talking about, Assange and the phone calls, I think right now, it does kind of feel like a futile effort making, calling your representative. But I think if you have a Democrat, representing you, I think there's so much pressure right now on the Democrats. And if we can, help build that pressure, I think that's a useful thing to do right now. It really seems like Biden is tanking his reelection because of what he's supporting in Gaza. So I think we should try to capitalize on that.
Yeah, 100% agree. And listen, again, phone calls are super. Hey, gamer, I love you too. Sorry. I think that it is, again, phone calls are so easy. I make phone calls all the time and they take 2 to 3 minutes. Almost always, very rarely do you get a human being. If you do, it's just some poor intern who just asked to take a message from you. They ask your name, where you're from, and the issue that you're calling about. You just tell them. But generally speaking, you just leave a message. It's super easy. It takes 2 to 3 minutes. So there's really no excuse, to not at least make an attempt. And the more people that call, the more pressure that there is. And Rob, what Dave just said there, I think is super important too, to point out that the Biden administration has always struggled a bit with the younger voting bloc, and this is making it so much worse. Like all the polling, and listen, I don't put a whole lot of stock in polls. I think you have to take them with a grain of salt. They're not I don't think they're incredibly accurate. However, I do think that the significant drop in support from the youth has been significant over the past couple of months.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't trust the polls either, but there's other indications beyond the polls that seem to indicate that the youth are not buying what the Democrats are selling, especially when it comes to Israel. You look at the TikTok data, the hashtag pro-Palestine or mostly pro-Palestinian posts are outnumbering the pro-Israeli posts from anywhere from 5 to 1 early on in the conflict. And I've seen now numbers that it's like 10 to 1 pro-Palestine. So all of the kids that are getting their news online from indie media generally are on the side of Palestine and not Israel. Basically, that tells me it's not necessarily an age thing. It's where you get your information from thing, because the older people generally tend to get their information from mainstream media who are pro-Israeli and feeding them nothing but lies nowadays. And in fact, I just saw something 2 days ago that CNN has been running 100% of their coverage and their commentary through the IDF before they actually put it out on there. That's for real.
I know.
So now we have confirmation. We already knew that, but I mean, now we have confirmation that the Intercept actually dropped that. So it's the young people, but it's anybody who happens to be getting their media online tends to be very, very much pro-Palestine. Now, the question is whether or not Joe Biden's going to actually realize that he's tanking and change some things before his election. I don't think he's there. So I don't think he's going to do that. But Dave's right. There are some Democrats who they're smart enough to realize that if you chain your election chances to this pro-Israel wagon, that you're basically committing suicide. Like you're really playing with fire. You're not going to win re-election, especially with younger folk who are now millennials now outnumber the boomers. So I mean, you have to do a political calculus. Are you willing to be on the side of this genocide, especially if it's going to cost you your job in a year? I think a lot of Democrats are vulnerable right now. I think they are. So yeah, one phone call that you make might be insignificant, but 1,000 or 10,000 phone calls to a very vulnerable pro-Israeli Democrat right now might be enough for them to kind of back off on the pro-Israel stuff and do the right thing for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, for sure. And yes, that's a great point. I mean, every time I make a phone call, I feel like an idiot because I'm like, this is such a, you know what I mean? Like, oh, why they don't care about my stupid little phone call. But if it's me and 10,000 other people making the same phone call on the same issue, putting pressure on them, I mean, that's a little bit different. And so that's why, and again, only takes a couple minutes. And you just, the fact that you mentioned TikTok as like a accurate representation of where people are politically, I think that's it's so funny to me that that's the time we live in. But you're right. And I think it's also very important to point out that it does matter where people are getting their news from. And I think that mainstream media is dying a very slow and painful death. It's fun to watch because I hate mainstream media, but there's no doubt about it. I think mainstream media is on its way out. I don't think that there's any salvaging it. And they know it too. I think that they're very fully aware of it. And it's just interesting to watch that play out. So, okay, let's shift gears. I want to talk about this. I have another article out from Dave here. Let me pull it up. Hold on. Here I go again. Okay, so the South Africa, so I don't know if we talked about this on the last panel that we did. It's been a few weeks since we were able to do one. I know that I've been talking about it on my show relentlessly. I had Sam Husseini on to talk about it. He was kind of the one sort of leading the charge publicly to encourage a country to do this. And South Africa, of all countries, I think it's just beautiful that it happens to be South Africa. But they have actually done the Genocide Convention through the ICJ, which is different than the ICC. We need to make that distinction. This is not the ICC. The ICJ is a very different system, very different court. And in fact, they have ruled in favor of Palestine in the past, which is why Sam Husseini made the suggestion to go to the World Court, which is what the ICJ is called, rather than go through the ICC. So Dave, tell us a little bit about South Africa. And there's also been a couple other countries, I think, who have come out in support of this effort. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I know it is gaining some support. But if you read this 84-page case that they brought to the ICJ, I mean, it's a really damning case for genocide. I've always been hesitant to use the word genocide just in general because I feel like it's overused, and it certainly is overused because you consider some of the things that the U.S. calls a genocide. Biden called the war in Ukraine a genocide. They say that China's committing a genocide. But when it comes to this war, I mean, you look at kind of the basic definition, and the ICJ, the Genocide Convention, they don't get into like cultural genocide and everything. It's basically, are they trying to destroy a people or a nation in whole or in part? And it's very clear from what Israel's doing in Gaza. You just look at the death toll, but besides that, imposing a full siege, using starvation as a weapon, that they're trying to destroy, the Palestinians in Gaza. What they want is for them to leave. And that's very clear from all these leaks and just the rhetoric from Israeli officials. They want to expel them all into Egypt. Well, that's not going to happen. So they're basically just going to kill them all or make life as miserable as possible, trying to destroy Gaza, as a Palestinian nation, or, it's not exactly a nation, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of an undeniable case. And I think the American officials who are supporting this genocide are very, nervous about this. And I think we could see I put a quote in, I mean, this story is about kind of the White House response, John Kirby's response. And he called it meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact. And that's because, when the history is going to be written in the future, depending on how much longer this thing goes on, if somehow it stops, it'll be and they really lift the siege. But I can't see that happening soon, unfortunately. I think when this history is written, people like John Kirby, people like Matt Miller at the State Department, they're going to be, the Goebbels of the day justifying this. John Kirby sits up there and shrugs his shoulders when they ask about Palestinian civilians being killed. He's even said, this was early on, that, yeah, they're going to continue to kill civilians. It's a price of war, basically. Yeah, they've killed, but, they're going after Hamas. But, history's not going to look back kindly on those words. And he's cried before when talking about Ukrainian civilians being killed or Israelis being killed on October 7th. I mean, I just have so much contempt for that guy when I watch his press conferences. Just visibly annoyed when he's asked about Palestinian civilians. So, yeah, I think, and then when it comes to the power of the ICJ, what could they actually do if they rule it's a genocide? And that won't happen for a few years. The big thing here is that what South Africa is looking for is, in this initial hearing, is for the ICJ to declare that Israel's committing acts that might be genocide and for them to order a halt to their military operations. And they don't really have the power to do that. But if this is ruled, this is a big deal, I still think. And this, it's a real diplomatic blow to Israel and the U.S., which has already isolated itself so much. If you look at the votes at the UN using their veto power at the UN Security Council resolution over and over again. So I don't know how much longer they'll be able to sustain this if the world, basically declares it's a genocide.
Yeah, and the world is already, and I think significantly against this whole thing. Anyway, we've seen that with the millions of people in the streets across the globe. But yeah, I think that obviously this is not going to be something that is the ICJ situation is not something that's going to happen overnight. But I do think that in terms of just continuing to put, and this is significant pressure. Like this is not protests, and not that protests aren't a significant pressure, but I think that this is especially if more countries sign on, which I don't know if countries have signed on or if they've just come out in public support of the effort. I'm not sure. I need to look into that a little bit further.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I've seen a couple. I think Sarah Abdallah has tweeted about it a couple of different times, and I think Sam Husseini has also been trying to figure out like where these countries actually stand and if they're actually signing on to this or if they're just kind of publicly. If you're publicly supporting it, you need to also sign on to it. There's just no excuse to not do that. Rob, I'm curious your thoughts on the word genocide, because I think, like Dave, I was a lot of these terms are co-opted, overused. It's language has become a nightmare. No words have no meaning. However, this, I think there is absolutely zero doubt. There is no doubt whatsoever that this is a genocide. And in fact, I have an entire thread dedicated to high-level Israeli officials and their proxies openly calling for a genocide. So to me, I think it's a no-brainer. This is one of the most clear-cut cases maybe we've ever seen. But what's your take on that? Because I know a lot of people kind of hesitate and clutch their pearls with the use of the word genocide. To me, it's apparent. It is very obvious.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the two things I would use to make my case were what you were talking about. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant talking about how these are human animals and we're going to do siege warfare and cut off their water supply and their electricity. Genocidal language is just rampant within the Israeli elites. You got Isaac Herzog, president of Israel, talking about how everyone is Hamas in Gaza, basically equating everybody to terrorists so that they can do. So that's the first point that I would make. And that's, exactly right. And then the other thing is what Dave said, it doesn't, you don't have to wipe out the entire people for it to be considered genocide. You just have to have that intent. And if you wipe out even just a significant portion, that's also genocidal. So I also am with you, Misty. I've been calling it a genocide basically since day one, because I know that it is absolutely Zionists' intent to wipe out Palestinians. Like ideologically, that's what they want to do. So yeah, I'm with you. And to piggyback off of what Dave was talking about with John Kirby, even John Kirby has actually walked back some of his rhetoric over the last couple of days. I don't know if you guys saw it. He came out publicly and said that Hamas actually can't be defeated because it's an ideology, which means that even he is feeling the pressure enough to backtrack. And Matthew Miller, it's funny. You should go look at his Twitter account. No one gets ratioed more times in a row than Matthew Miller. It's so funny. He's getting like the Kirsten Cinema treatment.
Yeah.
And I know that's a weird way to look at it as far as like trying to gauge how popular some of these ideas are and how popular people like Matthew Miller and like John Kirby, who are going to be the fall guys for this basically in the end. You can look and they just get ratioed every single time. So you can tell that no one's picking up what they're laying down, which makes them vulnerable, which means we have to just keep the pedal to the metal and keep the public pressure up. And maybe we actually, once you lose people like John Kirby and you get like people like Tony Blinken backtracking on stuff like this, the game's already over. The game's already over. They can squawk as much as they want, but public support's got to be 90%, 10%, probably even more lopsided than that pro-Israel or pro-Palestine right now. That is, they can't sustain that. And anybody that doesn't want to be like, branded with the scarlet A for a-hole for the rest of their life, it's going to have to backtrack on this stuff. So again, they might fold not for the right reasons, but because we just put them in a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
So I think it is a genocide. I think it's pretty obvious. Even John Mearsheimer was talking about this, I think it might have been Glenn Greenwald like 2 days ago. And he was like, yeah, I wasn't going to call it a genocide at first, but even I've come on to like definitionally, this is pretty cut and dry at this point.
Yeah. It's undeniable. Go ahead.
I was going to bring Mearsheimer up because he said something pretty interesting. that it was, if you remember, there was like that pause in fighting for about a week when they did the hostage exchange. Mearsheimer said after that, when Israel started basically going as hard as they were in the north, in the south, now where there's almost 2 million people displaced living in tents on the street, telling them, oh, there's safe zones, bombing the safe zones, and kind of restarting it and making it, just dropping as many bombs as they did on the north when all these people are down there. That's kind of what made him realize, oh, yeah, this actually is genocide. So, and we haven't seen any interest. I mean, look what Israel just did. They just drone striked a Hamas negotiator in Beirut.
Yeah.
The day before that happened, there's this report in Axios, and you never know with these reports, but there's this. They have a Israeli reporter at Axios, Barak Ravid. He's like an Israeli, kind of seems like he's like a liberal Israeli. But his reports are usually right. I just follow him pretty closely. But anyway, there was a report in Axios the day before that said Israel thought Hamas was again serious about negotiations, because for a little while Hamas said no negotiations until there's a ceasefire. And then they kind of backtracked and showed basically that they were open to talks and negotiations and made an offer that Israel rejected. So you have Israeli officials telling the media, oh, it looks like Hamas is serious about negotiating. And then the next day, they bomb Beirut for the first time since 2006 and kill a Hamas negotiator. I mean, just goes to show where their head is at.
Yeah.
And especially with Netanyahu. I mean, I make this point a lot, but I think it should really be stressed, is that there's poll after poll saying Israelis want him to step down after the war. He has every incentive to keep this thing going and expand it and provoke a bigger war to get the U.S. involved directly.
100%. And Kyle Anslone, who also writes for antiwar.com and also the Libertarian Institute, Kyle and I have been talking about that since day one that this thing started. When he would come on my show, he also said that Netanyahu was in trouble before this, y'all. And that's something that nobody's talking about right now. He was in a whole lot of trouble. There's a lot of corruption stuff. There was the judicial thing that he had going on. He was in trouble. And we all know, this is disgusting, but we all know that when a president or world leader is in trouble, what's something they can do to save their ass? Start a war. And so I'm not saying that they let October 7th happen. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if they let October 7th happen. There's a pretty significant reason to at least question that, at least ask those questions. You have one of the most sophisticated militaries with some of the most sophisticated surveillance in the world. Gaza is one of the most surveilled locations on planet Earth. And somehow they didn't see this coming. Somehow they allowed it to continue for hours unabated. It's just a little weird to me. It's a little suspicious. Obviously I just pulled up Dave's article from antiwar.com. Everybody please go to antiwar.com, subscribe. Dave does a great show, Antiwar News over there. Subscribe, share, bookmark, all that stuff. Help them out in getting their stuff circulated. I'm sure that they're heavily shadow banned, as are most people in independent media. But just to jump back to the Genocide Convention just for a moment, because I wanted to make sure that I shared this, because a volunteer, this is from Sam Husseini, a volunteer put together an awesome Google, I'm just going to show you Sam's tweet here. He says, a volunteer has put together a great document to reach out to countries critical of Israel so they back up South Africa's Invoke Genocide Convention at the ICJ. People can urge countries to make declarations of intervention to the World Court. More details via Husseini.org, which you should be subscribed to Sam anyway on Substack. I think that is a definitely a worthwhile subscription, but I'll show you just really quickly. Where am I? Here is this is awesome. This contact list. So a volunteer made this, very organized. I don't know who this is, but holy balls, I'm impressed. So it's just a list of all of the countries. It gives you the name of different people in positions of power, emails, phone numbers, addresses that you can write to, and then their stance on Palestine, different public statements that they have made, and whether or not they are, in fact, like this, Belize is calling it a genocide. So obviously that helps you prioritize who you might contact. If you see somebody who's already called it a genocide and has been publicly critical of Israel, start there. Start with those ones. Start leaning on them to be more bold in their actions. So definitely go check this out. Again, it's on Sam Husseini's Twitter. I'll tweet it out too. Yeah, but it's on Sam Husseini's Twitter. And then also if you go to Husseini.org, Sam's got an awesome article there where he just goes through what the ICJ is, some of the history of that stuff, why we should be contacting them rather than the ICC, all of that. So definitely go and check out that as well. So, okay, let's talk about, this is something that I thought was interesting as a former athlete, sports fan. We all saw that when Russia invaded Ukraine, they were banned from all sporting events. I even saw that they were like, I'm not joking, it's a real thing that happened. They were banning Russian cats. I'm not joking. They were banning from like I don't know, cat contests. I don't know, like they have dog shows or whatever. I'm not joking. They really were. It is beyond absurdity. I remember I was watching the CrossFit games and there was one Russian guy at the CrossFit games and they just put like a white square where his flag was supposed to be. They didn't let him bring, I think he got like third or something, and they made him carry a CrossFit flag rather than a Russian flag. So absurd, so ridiculous. But if we're going to do that to Russia, certainly we should be banning Israel from competing in all international arenas. And as Miko Peled here says, sporting, academic, cultural, diplomatic, etc. George Galloway, I think, was one of the first to call for this. He did a Mother of All talk shows, or no, he's doing one, I guess, tonight. Today is Sunday. So, and I love George Galloway. But what do you guys think about this? I think that this is, I don't know how much this matters necessarily to Israel. I'm not sure how much they care about whether or not they can compete in sporting events. But I certainly think it's something that if we're going to be consistent, this needs to be done.
Well, I think too, Israel has really shown that kind of the boycotting stuff scares them.
Yeah.
Like if you see the way that they reacted, what is it, a couple of years ago now when Ben and Jerry's said they were going to stop selling ice cream only in West Bank settlements in East Jerusalem. And they launched this like campaign in the US to push against it. And they eventually won because Ben and Jerry's is owned by Unilever, which is like a big conglomerate. But yeah, no, I think it could be useful. It's funny because this is something like with the Russia stuff, it just seems so silly. Yeah. And I know there's other things like they're like, not using Russian composer in music, like orchestras would stop, be banned from playing like a Russian composer in Europe and stuff. Like there's so many ridiculous examples of this. So yeah, I mean, I guess more pressure would be good. I can't really think of like I don't know much about like global sporting events besides like the Olympics. I know it's always a big deal. I think in judo, Israel is, because in some countries don't allow, in that region, Israeli athletes to participate in anything in general. But I think it was judo. It was like Iran and Israel faced off and it was a big deal. Because those things are a big deal to people, especially, soccer too. Mm-hmm. But again, I'm just not too familiar enough with like what they'd be participating in.
I think soccer would be huge, and the Olympics are this year. So
okay. Oh yeah,
that would be massive.
I keep forgetting that.
Yeah, I think banning them from the Olympics would be a massive statement. I don't think it's going to happen because that's just not the world we live in. But I think that if we could put enough pressure on them to do something like that, I think that would be significant. Because I think you're right. I'm not sure how much they really care about. We can't compete in the Olympics. How devastating. But I do think that the general conversation around banning, boycotting, all of that stuff has always very clearly made them nervous. And they've been making attempts in the United States to make it illegal to do so. So yeah, I think that would definitely be something that at the very least would make them incredibly uncomfortable. Rob, what do you think?
Well, I think you're right. I think it's unlikely that they will actually be like boycotted, but we should count on them being there. And you guys remember like during the World Cup a couple of years ago where there were like Israeli interviewers, and as soon as they introduced themselves to people from like Qatar and all these other people, that they were like, nope, we're not talking to you. Yep. If they're going to be there, we better make sure we get all those clips together to watch how everybody hates them, make sure we create our montage, get a whole bunch of people to boo them no matter what they do. And if there's going to be a particularly like feisty fight, in some sport where it's like Iran versus Israel and the guy from Iran absolutely whoops on the Israeli guy, we got to make sure that absolutely goes viral as well. So I'm the type of guy where it's like the Israelis are so absurd with the way that they do things where I almost kind of want to give them more spotlight, because every time they talk, it's like, can you see like if they let him into the Olympics and then like Smooly Boteach goes there with like he's like trying to interview people, but everybody makes fun of him and like turns their back on him. Nothing would make me happier than for that to happen, and it absolutely would. So yeah, like it'd be cool to like boycott them. It's not going to happen, but in the meantime, if they're going to be there, we might as well just make a mockery of them. I think that would be fun.
Yeah. Yes, I 100% agree with that. I actually almost I kind of want them just to go. I want them like now that I'm thinking about it, you're right. That would be
They're
amazing.
so absurd, like
yeah.
patently absurd that they might have their like 5 to 10% that think that what they're doing is funny, but you've seen some of the stuff they're doing, like these ads where it's like these kids coming out like, I'm a Zionist, and I'm it's like it's the most like poorly written propaganda that it's actually borderline like satire.
Yeah.
And they have no idea. They have no idea that they're coming off that way to anyone, that other 90%. So it's almost like I want more cameras on them, and I want them to keep doing this, because the longer they keep doing this like absurd Hasbara, the more it becomes obvious that these people are like obviously the crazy and the evil ones. And it's good for a laugh too.
Yes.
A lot of this stuff is really quite hysterical.
Well, yes, and you have to I'm a big fan of Gallows humor. It's the only way I survive. Seriously, I'm not joking. Like I have to there's times on my show where I laugh at things and I'm like, if you don't know me, like you probably think that I am a horrific person because I'm here laughing about this, but it's like I have to find a way to laugh at horrific things. Otherwise, there's no way I could do what I do. And I think that what's so interesting about what you said, and I've been talking about this a lot because prior to, and we've seen the situation with Israel and Palestine flare up numerous times over the decades. And in previous situations, up until this point, historically speaking, Israel has had a full lock on narrative. They have been able to just sell, they can basically control mainstream media in the West. They're able to just tell them what to print, what to say online or on air, all of that stuff. And so I think that and we kind of touched on this earlier, to me, I think what is so significant and what is one of the most interesting aspects of this whole situation is that there is no question about it, no denying it. There's no debating it. Israel has completely lost the narrative. They have completely lost the PR war. And I think that what has, in my opinion, what has been really significant facilitator of that is social media, is the idea that we now have the ability in real time to watch what's happening and then to also debunk the bullshit that they're putting out, which we have seen happen. I mean, how many lies have they been caught in, y'all? Seriously, like just bold-faced, disgusting, 40 beheaded babies. I mean, really? Al-Shifa Hospital being a Hamas command center, the rape allegations which listen, y'all, Max Blumenthal and Aaron Matei are absolute fucking legends, because that is not an easy subject matter to attack and attempt to debunk, especially if you're two dudes. And they have done their work on this is so unbelievably solid. It is good. It is relentless. It is fearless. They are not backing down. It is so important what they are doing. They're not getting enough credit for it, in my opinion. And it is, but the idea that Israel would lie to that degree, and the idea that the New York Times reported, what's his name? Gettleman, right? Gettleman? Am I saying that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the idea that he would mislead a victim's family members and say that, oh yeah, we're going to write about this, and then turn her into some rape victim, despite the fact there being no evidence to support those claims, is so disgusting. As a woman, I'm so repulsed by the weaponization of sexual assault in this anytime it's weaponized, but in particular, in order to justify a genocide, go fuck yourselves. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's really something like that New York Times story, the family, the picture that's featured in it, they like seeing what they said after.
Yeah.
Is just, I mean, you know that a lot of New York Times journalists are scumbags, but like to do that, to mislead them, a family like that, about their daughter who was killed recently. Yes. I mean, man, it's like a new low. And one thing that's kind of interesting, we've been like running, like linking to a lot more kind of just mainstream media articles on this, what's happening in Gaza, not stuff like that, obviously, but you see a lot of reports from like AP, even sometimes even the New York Times or the Washington Post, just basically from people on the ground. And like, they're just describing what's happening. And there's no way to put that in like kind of like any sort of light that makes Israel look good. Like it's just describing the horrors. Like there's one, I forget, I think it was the Independent, which again, just something like, it's not a news source I would normally just put a link to on our page, but it was describing a scene in a hospital in Gaza, and it was just so horrific. It was based on a British surgeon who just got home and was talking about it, and it's just like, yeah, just the reality of it, of what's happening on the ground. I mean, no matter what, even if you're like an Israel supporter, like, how can you justify supporting this just mass slaughter of people? And then we always hear over 20,000 killed, or whatever the number is now. And there's also the people injured, the thousands of children who are maimed and don't have limbs and had to get limbs cut off without anesthesia. Like, just hard. And women getting C-sections without, I mean, just like reading stuff like that, it's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Why are we, I think it's making a lot more people say, like, even like boomers who, you know, grew up just thinking for whatever reason that you had to support Israel. I would imagine it's making even them question, like, okay, why are we supporting, like, what benefit do we have, especially as now the risk of sending, you know, a real big war breaking out in the region and American troops are going to start dying. It's like, okay, what are we doing this for? You know, what? And that's a question I would like to ask. You know, I'm like 3.5 hours south of DC. I want to get into the State Department press briefing one day. I got to get up there. And like, I mean, there's a ton of questions I want to ask, but I really want to ask, like, just see what their best BS answer would be. Like, why is Israel so important? Like, what is the real benefit to doing this, to supporting them? What are we doing? And just kind of see what they say. Because it's just like, what can they say? Oh, they're our only ally in the Middle East. No, they're not. We're allies with Saudis, Bahrain, Qatar, all these Arab countries. Like that, you know, that narrative is just complete nonsense. I'm just curious what they would try to spin, you know?
Well, I think, didn't Kennedy say straight up it's a military outpost? I mean, he just, I hate the guy, but at least he was honest. That's really what it is. It's just it's nothing more than a power, like, it's a resource grab, power grab. We want to make sure that we can control a region. So we just created Israel so that we have a foothold there. I mean, that's really essentially what happened.
But even that, it's like, we're also in, again, like in all that, our biggest bases are in Qatar. The U.S. only has like a small secret military base in Israel.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know.
I know. It is crazy though. It is crazy. But yeah, I mean, I do think it's been significant to watch the way that the narrative has completely fallen apart on Israel's part. Because again, they had such control over it. Prior to this, I used to say nobody does spin quite like Israel. I mean, I'm so bad at names, and I'm so sorry. When they killed the medic in the Great March of Return, Rezan. I'm so bad at names.
Yeah, I
I'm
know
sorry.
who you're talking about. I can't think of her
I'm
name,
terrible at names. I'm so sorry. I can see your face. I'm terrible at
like
names.
Rezan El Najjar, maybe.
Yes,
that might be wrong.
Maybe I don't know. But when they killed her, I mean, within 30 minutes, they had a story out. She was using, she was human shield. Blah, blah. I mean, they had a story out, ready to slander her, ready to, and that was, you know, the way that they operated. They were so good at controlling the narrative, and I think now and also, there's just not enough credit in the world to the journalists on the ground in Gaza. There's just not. I have never seen more more incredible acts of courage. I can't imagine. They know they're being targeted. They're not dumb. They are fully aware of the fact that they are being targeted. Their families are being targeted. They know that that's happening, and yet they stay. I mean, Jesus, Wael al-Dawood, they slaughtered a bunch of his family. He went back to work. He went and identified their bodies, went right back to work. Then they shot him and killed his cameraman. Dude went right back to work, went to the hospital, got patched up, went right back to work. I don't have the capacity to even wrap my head around the level of courage. I don't think I have that. I'm not going to lie.
We lost another kid yesterday.
Yeah. And he's back at work. Like, and I think it's because of them. Obviously, a lot of citizen journalism as well. Everybody's got a cell phone now, so people are able to report in real time about what's happening. But I think that that's been the game changer, right? We've seen Israel have so much support globally, at least the facade of support. I think they've created this environment where if you dare to even question them, you're anti-Semitic. And that's even falling away. That line isn't working anymore. That smear isn't working anymore. And I think that that's... and again, the ability to debunk stuff in real time, I think, has been just a significant game changer. Rob, what do you think about that? Because I feel like the way that we're seeing that all play out, it's kind of the juxtaposition, I think, to watching journalism die also is so hard for me to even comprehend, because we see such incredible bravery and citizen journalism taking place at the same time that we see stuff like Gettleman and the New York Times lying, stuff like Julian Assange continuing to be persecuted. And it's just this weird, it feels like we are genuinely in a battle for truth right now. And I know that sounds very dramatic, but I really genuinely think that we're at this weird turning point in human history in terms of truth.
We absolutely are. And it's not just social media. It's that indie media is getting better connected with each other and learning that we don't have to actually we don't have to have a hierarchy where there's a company owns your television channel, so you have to say whatever that company basically wants. If we're all connected and kind of work as more as like a horizontal community where we're just kind of cross-pollinating and making sure that all the people that are on the ground have access to internet and they can get us videos, we can watch all this stuff in real time. And this, I agree with you, Misty, this is the first time I think maybe ever we're able to watch a genocide in real time. It used to be, with newspapers, you would get pictures of mass graves and stuff, but it would be like weeks or months after the fact. And that would be very difficult for you to gin up, a revolution around, stopping like the Vietnam War. But like nowadays, it's like on the fly. So it really is a paradigm shift in the way that we absorb our news, but also how we disseminate our news. And that's what I try to preach since day one of doing my show, is that if we all kind of build this network that's more or less horizontal and just get on each other's shows and talk in good faith about this stuff, there's more of us than there are them. So we're going to get the views. And now that we're in such a the end of empire stage where everybody's more or less like poor people, they're always going to gravitate towards more like everyday people telling them what they see on what's going on in Gaza. Independent news is naturally going to be it's going to have people gravitate towards it. So I think that this is part of the reason why censorship on the internet has become priority number one for a lot of these elites, is because I think they realize that they are getting their ass whooped online, particularly with young people. And even the ADL, there was a leaked audio file to the Tehran Times like a month ago of Jonathan Greenblatt, head of the ADL, talking about how they already know that the divide when it comes to Israel is no longer red versus blue. It's all young versus old. So they know they're getting squashed by everybody that's under the age of 35. And so they understand what's going on, which is why they're trying to censor everybody. And if I may just bounce back to that New York Times article, the Gray Zone did a wonderful stunt yesterday as well, live. I don't know if you saw it. So they went and they're debunking a lot of the October 7th, sensationalized rape allegations that look like they probably didn't happen. There's no real evidence that they did happen. And all of the firsthand eyewitness testimony is so sensationalized that it seems like it's probably just a lie. So what they did is they come out and they debunk it, on the fly, because they had this out early in October as well. They've been talking about how all this is bogus. They were one of the first, to do so. And then what they did is they waited for someone at the New York Times to write a smear article on the Gray Zone. And then they called up, so they knew they were getting contacted by the person writing that. And then they called them live yesterday and debunked what they were doing on
It's the Washington Post, but yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't see that.
Oh, it's so funny. Like Aaron,
I just pulled it up. Aaron and Matt. Yeah.
the person writing the hit piece on them.
Do not come for Max Blumenthal unless you are really prepared to come for Max Blumenthal. This is not the first time he's done this. He also went at oh crap, I'm blanking. Oh shit. I'm so bad at this. God damn it.
He went after Elin Levy on Rising.
He's done it a couple different times.
Elin Levy is the it's a fake ass title. He's the minister of October 7th or something like that. The Hamas attack on October 7th. He's a huge propagandist. Yeah. So I saw he was challenging Elin to come on Rising, and even Robbie Sove on Rising tweeted at Elin Levy to come on the show, and he won't do it. He goes, I'm not gonna dignify him with a debate. Yeah, no one will debate Max Blumenthal, and he should be very proud of himself because no one will touch him, because he has that wealth of knowledge and no one's gonna mess with him. RFK won't debate him on it.
Yes, Reef, thank you. The Ned lady, the National Endowment for Democracy lady. Yes, Max Blumenthal and Alexander Rubinstein. I had Alex on my show right after that happened. That's why I'm so mad at myself for blanking. Thank you, Reef. My head was hurting. I was sitting here trying
I remember
to...
that.
Yeah, Do not come for Max Blumenthal. I don't know why people keep trying to do that. Do not come for Max Blumenthal.
But is the Washington Post writing some on them, or did they publish?
They wrote us, or they were preparing a smear piece, and she contacted them for comment, and so he called her live on air, and he's like, "Let's talk about it," and she's like, "Well, I have to get on another call right now," and he's like, "No, we need to talk about this right now," and she just keeps trying to. It's so funny. I highly recommend everybody go check it out. It is amazing. But
I love that tactic, because they're never gonna talk to Max other than for that. And what she did is she sent him an email thinking that he would just ignore it.
Yeah.
And he's like, nope, I'm gonna go live tomorrow with Aaron, and we're gonna call her back, and we're gonna have some comments, because otherwise they won't talk to him.
Yeah, Max is excellent. He has an encyclopedia brain. I have so much admiration for like people like Whitney Webb, who can hold all of that information organized inside their head and then recall it at I can't do that. My brain is like in constant 9,000 mile an hour motion. I can't like grab onto things and hold them in any organizational fashion whatsoever. As I'm plainly displaying here, as I'm struggling to come up with names and stuff, it's hard for me to do that. So I find people like that fascinating. And Max is a unbelievable wealth of knowledge. He knows what the fuck he's talking about, especially about Israel, Palestine. My guy has lived there. He's done documentaries. He's written books. Like, he knows his shit. Don't come for Max Blumenthal if you do not have your shit together. He will annihilate you, which is what he did. And it's, I love it. And Aaron as well. Aaron's much nicer than Max, though.
Lately, Aaron's been getting mouthy, though. He's been like straight up calling Israel.
I think Max
Israelis
is wearing
Nazis,
off on him a little bit. Yeah. I think Max he's getting a little bit of that Blumenthal rubbed on him a little bit. But yeah, that's and I cannot again, I know I've already said it, I cannot give them enough credit for the work that they've been doing on all of this stuff, especially given the fact that they're Jewish. I think that's, in my opinion, I've said this before, and I've had people yell at me, how dare you diminish Palestinian voices? That's not my intention here. But in my opinion, in the fight against Zionism, there is absolutely no more important voice than the anti-Zionist Jewish voice, period. I think that there is nothing more powerful than an anti-Zionist Jewish voice right now. And again, I'm not trying to diminish the Palestinian voice. Obviously, they are quite capable of standing up for themselves. They've been doing it for a very long time. But I think that this is a genuine fight against Zionism. It's not just a fight necessarily against Israel. And I think that anti-Zionist Jewish voices are hugely powerful right now. And I mean, we talked a little, I think Rob, you talked about a little bit earlier about the idea that, they keep trying to pretend as if this is a fight against Hamas, and that, if you blow up, like they just killed 80 people, I think, in an attack on a civilian building. You blow up 80 people, and they keep trying to claim that, oh, there was a Hamas fighter there. So let's just pretend you're right. Let's just pretend that there's one Hamas guy in a building with 80 people in it. Let's pretend there's 5 Hamas guys in a building with 80 people in it. Do you think that blowing up 75 innocent people is going to kill Hamas? Or do you think that that is just a really good recruiting day for Hamas? Because that's what you're doing. You're just recruiting for Hamas. This doesn't end Hamas. This ensures that Hamas continues forever and ever and ever. I mean, why do you think it started in the first place? And I actually wanted to pull up, oh, come on. Hold, please. Caitlin Johnstone, you guys know I love her. She just wrote this amazing piece. It's insane that anyone is still supporting Israel. And she's often very good at putting into words the things that I'm trying to say and struggle with. And I highly recommend this article, because to me, this is something that I just don't understand. I don't have the ability to make it make sense in my head. How anyone, and we kind of touched on this earlier, how is anyone still supporting Israel at this point, y'all? This is not, again, this is not even almost confusing. It's not, this is very clear. There is the oppressor and there are the oppressed. There's the occupier and there are the occupied. This is not even close. It's not this, there's a very clear bad guy here. And it's so, is it just the power of propaganda? Do you guys think that that's what it is? Or that people are just so unbelievably mind fucked that they can't see it? Because I just don't understand. I don't understand how anyone is still able to offer any support whatsoever for Israel at all.
Yeah, and that they don't realize that they're very, very much alone. I think there is very little support for Israel. There might be like a handful of like boosted accounts on social media, but honestly, I don't think they realize exactly how alone they are. And it leads them to do things kind of like what I was talking about earlier. When when you argue something like, oh, we just killed 80 civilians to get one guy, even political novices look at that and go, proportionality. Like you can't do that. If there's a school shooter that goes into your elementary school and you get there and the police get there and then they order an airstrike on the school and say,
Right.
hey, we had to get the school shooter. You go, no, you just killed all of our kids to get a school shooter. You can't do that. And so any normal person's going to look at that type of argument. Well, we had to do it because there was one Hamas there. Even if that one Hamas person is the most evil person in the planet, which I'm not granting them that. I don't believe that. I think Hamas is more of a resistance group than a terrorist group. But even if he were the most evil terrorist on planet Earth, you still can't kill 100 civilians or 50 civilians to get that one person. So this is why they're losing the propaganda battle, is because they don't realize how absurd that is. When you come into a debate and then you're going, well, Israel just bombed a refugee camp and killed 200 people, and you go, yeah, but there was a Hamas fighter there. That's not landing with as many people as you think it is. It's really, and so that's why I like it when they keep talking, because it's so patently absurd. And every time they have that kind of discussion, 90% of the viewers that see that are going to think that's absolutely psychotic, which it absolutely is.
Yeah.
So, I hope they actually keep talking. I don't think there's as many people. I mean, in the U.S., because we live in the U.S., there might be a handful of like older people still drinking the mainstream media Kool-Aid who kind of are on Israeli side, and there might be a handful of people who are like actual Zionists who believe in it for religious purposes.
Yeah.
But anybody that's a young person that has a good head on their shoulders can look at that and go, no, you can't just like bomb a school and then say there was, Hamas. And then the other thing, a lot of the infrastructure that they're building, they bomb it saying that there's Hamas there, and then like Al-Shifa Hospital, and then there's reporting and people look into it later on, it turns out there wasn't. Like even the Washington Post had to come out and say that there wasn't a Hamas headquarters in Al-Shifa Hospital. It was weeks late, but even they've had to admit. So people are onto their game. I don't think they have as much support as they think they do. So we'll just have to see how it plays out. And that's why I think it's I think also behind the scenes, a lot of our Congress people actually realize exactly how unpopular this is. And if it turns out this gets called a genocide by the ICJ, do they really want to be labeled genociders for history? That's something they really have to be asking themselves. So, we just got to keep doing what we're doing. I think that they're going to lose this PR, but it's already lost, but they're going to continue to lose it the longer this goes on and the longer that they overtly go out and defend it as if it's okay.
For sure. Yes. And I think that's again, it's just so clear to me. And what's been so frustrating for me, and Dave, maybe you can speak to this because you're a libertarian, and I don't know that it's necessarily a lot of libertarians, but I do see a lot of people on the right who are out here every day freaking out, rightfully so, about child sex trafficking, about Jeffrey Epstein, about all of that stuff. And then they give full-throated support to Israel. Who the fuck you think he was working for, y'all? Who do you think Jeffrey Epstein was working for? Who do you think he was working for? Ghislaine Maxwell's father was Robert Maxwell. Who do you think he worked for? It is really bizarre to me. And we see this on a host of issues. Like we saw people who were able to easily recognize Russiagate fall for Ukraine. Fall for, you know what I mean? Like you have the whole host of stuff where people will be able to see through some propaganda, but then other propaganda they get hung up on. And it's very weird to me how that works. But it's just, I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I understand that there's been a lot of propaganda through the years, in particular on the right. I think a lot of it is with a lot of the Christian right. On the Israel issue, there's been a lot of facilitating of support for Israel in those spheres. But to me, it's just I guess it's because it's just so obvious. This one again is not even close. This is not a close call. There's not gray space here. There really is not. There's just not. There's no like, well, it's people were being held in an open air concentration camp for decades and decided to fight back. That's what we're looking at here. This is, people were pushed out of their homes in 48, and there's been decades of brutalization ever since. And it's just not close. And I just don't know if people are unaware of the actual history, if they don't have the full context, or if they've just been lied to and manipulated so much that they just can't see through it. But the idea that anybody, especially people who care about kids or claim to care about kids, are supporting Israel, I don't get it. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty disheartening for me because, the whole Ukraine thing, it felt like we were really getting somewhere with people on the right.
Yes.
Not just people I know, not just, regular Americans, but even in Congress, like, a lot of people were really good on Ukraine and who are all just awful, on it.
Yeah.
About as bad as you can be. And, but kind of from my life, kinda anecdotally, like, a lot of friends of mine are, on the right. I'm a lot friends with a lot of, Trump voters, and maybe it's because they know me, but I think a lot of them are also kind of viewing this as a similar thing. It's like, why should we be supporting this war? Like, and then they see all the kids being killed. It's just like, why, they're kind of looking at it from the same lens as they did the Ukraine war.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you guys mentioned, young, it's kind of more young demographic versus older people. I am seeing that with younger, kind of people on the right, that they don't have this affinity for Israel. And there was kind of this whole Christian thing, there's like this specific kind of evangelicals, I forget how it's pronounced exactly. Because I remember I said something on my show about, there's these evangelical Christians who have to support Israel. And I had a few evangelicals say, hey, that's not me. That's somebody in the chat knows Dispen. I forget. But anyway, it's this very new type strand of evangelical Christianity that started in the 1800s that they think they have to support Israel and Jews in the Holy Land. When if you look at, you read the Bible, anything about Christian doctrine, there is no need for a Holy Land anymore. That's all kind of Jesus's whole thing. But anyway, that's an area I try to focus on because I know a lot of, look at what they're doing to the Palestinian Christians, not just in Gaza, but what's happening in the West Bank. There's been an ethnic cleansing of Palestinian Christians, and the ones who flee, it's a little easier for them to assimilate in the West because they could go find a church. All the ones that flee, they don't say they fled because of Muslims were persecuting them. They say they left because of the Israeli occupation. Bethlehem, the city where the town where Jesus was born, it was about 80% Christian, from back in, the 40s and the 50s. Now it's like 11%. And they've built the apartheid wall through Bethlehem. They've seized the property of Christians. So these are things I kind of try to stress when, because I know I do it. What I love about antiwar.com is that I have readers and listeners of my show from like all across the political spectrum. It's very cool. I like that. I think, to be honest. But I kind of try to stress because I know I do have a lot of, even with the Ukraine war, we've gained a lot of people more on the right, kind of like the MAGA right. So knowing that they're listening to us, reading us, I kind of try to stress these things like about the Palestinian Christians and even property rights. If you look at this from a libertarian, lens of property rights, the Palestinians are the ones clearly having their right to their private property violated by the Israeli occupation, especially in the West Bank. I mean, it's a clear-cut case of military occupation and, not giving the people that live there the natural rights that they deserve, that all people should have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think things are changing, and it does feel like there's momentum, but unfortunately, it's not going to change things politically and
Yeah. No, nothing changes. They don't care about us. They don't give a fuck what we think. They do not care. They don't care at all what you think, what you want them to do, how you want them to vote. If you don't have billions of dollars to shove in their pockets, they do not care at all about what you think. So, okay. And yes, I love the fact that I'm in the same position. I have a very diverse audience. I have people from all across, and there are some people who would say that that's bad. Like I remember when they tried to point their finger at Jimmy Dore and say that, you MAGA people listen to you. See, that's good. Like, it's really weird to me that people expect you to isolate yourself into some kind of weird bubble and only have, other people from your safe space that watch your show. I want people from all across the political spectrum to watch and listen.
I mean,
to
you think about real life, like, I have friends, family. I'm not the type of person that would cut somebody off for their political views.
No.
I even have friends that are, Israeli, and I know someone whose daughter's in the IDF, and they're my friend. And I know actually somebody who is basically, his family's from Israel. He's kind of pro-Israel, but he started listening to my show and listened every day. And I'm just like wondering, is he still listening? Because he could be. Maybe I changed his mind on an issue that's so like personal to him.
Yeah.
Even though he has family from, you just never know. I just don't think it's worth cutting really anybody out of your life, or like to kind of
I mean, I guess it depends on like your relationship. Like I would not cut family members off for that. I mean, if it's just like some acquaintance or whatever. I mean, if you're supporting genocide, I kind of side eye you a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I mean, I don't see how we could really have much in common if you're somebody who's willing to support genocide. But I mean,
I also know, so it's interesting, someone I have in mind who was Israel posting for a while when this thing first started has stopped. Like, kind of, and I wonder, like, looking at that, thinking about what's going through their head. And it actually stopped when Israel killed 3 hostages. I think that was a big moment for a lot of people, pro-Israel people. Like, wait a minute, what are they doing? Like, isn't the whole point to get the hostages? And they killed them when they were naked with the white flag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who were previously pro-Israeli are, and we've seen that. Like I've seen numerous TikToks or whatever where people are like, "Listen, I am Jewish. I was raised in a Zionist family. I was brainwashed to think all of these things." And this situation has kind of been a smack in the face to them. And I think a lot of people are re-examining their positions, and I think that that's fantastic. I honestly don't think it's going to be soon enough to save Gaza, which is unbelievably sad. But I think that it just seems like we're on a collision course with disaster there. They've already completely leveled most of it, made it uninhabitable, which was the goal to begin with. It's so much easier to bulldoze and rebuild your Zionist heaven if you just go ahead and blow it up first. You know what I mean? It's so much time. It saves so much time. So unfortunately, I don't know. Okay, we're out of time. I don't want to keep you guys all day. I want you to be able to go and enjoy your Sunday. Rob, tell everybody what you have coming up. Where can people find you, support you, all that stuff?
Yeah. I don't use my YouTube channel very much anymore. That's where I do the book club. It looks like we're going to be analyzing Seymour Hersh's Chain of Command coming up here. I'm still having votes coming in. I gave my viewers a chance to kind of like vote on what book we're going to do. And then I'm on Rockfin and Rumble, Robert Durden, Real Rob Durden on Twitter. And you can just, follow me whenever. I've been a little bit slower on the videos this season because I have a youngster. We had a kiddo, but yeah, I still upload to Rumble pretty routinely and Rockfin about every 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah, kids slow stuff down.
yeah, he's loud. He only takes 1 nap a day for about an hour, which is what I'm doing right now. I'm doing
it's
this.
Rough. My kids are older and they still slow stuff down, so I get it. All right, Dave, what do you have coming up? Where can people find you?
All my writings at antiwar.com in the top news section. That's what I focus on. I write kind of these short news articles every day. So go to antiwar.com. You can listen to my show, Antiwar News with Dave Decamp. It's on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble, or most people listen to the audio version. So wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can follow me on Twitter. That's pretty much it.
Yeah. And Dave is a regular on my show too. I try to have him, as often as possible. Okay, so my show on TNT Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. This week it's kind of a libertarian week, which was unintentional, but here we are. So Monday we have Kyle Anzalone, Tuesday Connor Freeman, Wednesday Sarah Higdon, Thursday Dave Benner, and then Friday, which happens to be my birthday, is Elizabeth Voss from Consortium News. I'm very excited to have Elizabeth on with the Assange stuff coming up. I'm trying to get as many Assange-related guests. I'm working on getting one of the plaintiffs from the CIA case on the show to talk about that, because that's a whole thing. If you haven't been following that, you should be. And then obviously just trying to get as many shows in about Assange as I can before the court dates in February. So again, let me pull that up one more time. Did I already delete it? Oh, did I? Oh, fuck my life. Hold on. I'll pull it up real quick. I just want to give you guys
one more thing before we go. One more thing. So just to go to what Dave was saying about how if you wanted to go and ask Congress like about all of this stuff, the reason that they'll never be able to give you an answer on this stuff is because of the Epstein stuff. And now, okay, do you know how Tony Blinken is related to Epstein? Like, so it's Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell,
his stepdad, right?
Stepdad,
right. Yeah, Samuel Pisar. It was Epstein's lawyer and confidant was his stepdad. So that tells you this, like, these people they're all controlled.
Yes.
So that's why they're never going to give you, and they will go to the bitter end because the alternative is that, We're not
Robert Kennedy, fully
Yeah.
fucking controlled, y'all. Stop
Right.
it with your nonsense. He's a grassroots
So I just-
peace candidate. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, since Epstein
Zionist
is
piece of shit.
in the news, I had to mention that, like, literally the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense, like, all of these people they're compromised.
Of
They're
course
owned.
they are. Yes, they are completely
Anyway,
controlled.
that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the graphic one more time. Please go share this with everybody everywhere. Try to make as many phone calls as you can. You can call more than once. Be annoying. I am. The more you call, the more they have to hear. They have to take note of every call that they get and what the issue is for. So the more you call, the more notations there will be on the issue. So call, share it with your friends, make your friends call, have a little phone call party, whatever you got to do. We need as many phone calls as we can get leading up to the 20th and the 21st. Obviously, the court date is in London, so it's not necessarily directly impacted by what our Congress thinks, but the charges stem from here. It is a United States case. And so we need to start putting as much pressure. Really, we should have been doing this all along, and some of us have been, but we need as much pressure humanly possible in the United States. They just need to drop the charges. It's bullshit. There are the idea that they even think they have a case is astonishing to me, but here we are in the upside down world. So make as many phone calls as you can. I'm not sure when we're doing another one of these. It's hard to schedule. Everybody's very busy. So we'll try to put one together, see who we can get scheduled, who has the most free time or whatever in the days coming up. But we'll try to get one out relatively soon. If there's anybody that you want to see from Antiwar and INN team up, let us know. If there's like a little pairing that you think would be interesting or cool or whatever, let us know. And yeah, I think that's it. Does anybody else have anything else? Are we good? I think we're good.
Yeah,
and thanks for the happy early birthday, Charlie. I love my birthday. It's my favorite day. Yes, I'm a Capricorn. I get my way all day. It's amazing. I mean, after work, but it's fine. All right, y'all. We will see you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you.